new girl on base, targeted by Marines. Her true rank shocked everyone. The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton as a dusty sedan pulled up to the main gate. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez adjusted his uniform and walked toward the vehicle, clipboard in hand. Another new arrival, he thought, probably some fresh-faced recruit who'd need their hand held for the first few weeks. The car door opened, and out stepped a young woman who barely looked old enough to vote, let alone serve in the Marines. She stood maybe 5'4", with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing civilian clothes that looked like they came from a department store clearance rack. Her sneakers were worn, and she carried a single duffel bag that had seen better days. "You must be Sarah Chan," Rodriguez said, checking his list. "Welcome to Camp Pendleton." Sarah nodded quietly, her dark eyes taking in the sprawling military base around her. The massive facility stretched as far as she could see, with buildings, training grounds, and Marines in camouflage uniforms moving with purpose in every direction. The sound of helicopters overhead, mixed with the distant crack of rifle fire from the training ranges. "First time on a Marine base?" Rodriguez asked, noticing how she seemed to absorb every detail around her. "Something like that," Sarah replied softly, shifting her bag to her other shoulder. Rodriguez led her through the administrative building, pointing out various offices and explaining the base routine. As they walked, several Marines stopped what they were doing to stare. Word traveled fast on military bases, and by lunchtime, everyone would know about the new girl who looked like she'd gotten lost on her way to college. In the mess hall, the stares became more obvious. Corporal Jake Mitchell, a burly man from Texas with arms covered in tattoos, nudged his buddy Lance Corporal Tony Ritchie. "Check out the new meat," he whispered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Bet she cries before the week's out." Sarah took her tray to an empty table in the corner, seemingly unbothered by the attention. She ate her lunch in silence, occasionally glancing up at the Marines around her who weren't trying very hard to hide their amusement. $20 says she's gone by Friday," Mitchell announced to his table of friends. "Look at her. She probably thinks this is summer camp." The comments continued throughout the week. During morning PT, Sarah struggled to keep up with the physical training, finishing last in nearly every exercise. The drill instructors didn't go easy on her, shouting commands and pushing her to move faster, but she never complained or asked for special treatment. She just kept trying, even when sweat poured down her face and her legs shook from exhaustion. "Chen! Move those feet, like you mean it!" Gunnery Sergeant Williams barked as Sarah brought up the rear during a 5-mile run. "My grandmother runs faster than that, and she's been dead for 10 years. The other Marines laughed as they jogged past her, but Sarah just nodded and kept running. Even when she was clearly struggling, she maintained perfect form and never stopped moving forward. In the barracks, things weren't much better. Sarah's bunkmate, Private First Class Maria Santos, was one of the few who showed her any kindness. "Don't let them get to you," Santos whispered one night after lights out. "They're just testing you." Everyone gets hazed when they're new, but the treatment Sarah received went beyond normal military hazing. During weapons training, Corporal Mitchell would deliberately give her incorrect information about her rifle, then act surprised when she couldn't perform the tasks correctly. When she asked questions, he'd roll his eyes and make comments about how civilians shouldn't be allowed on base. "Maybe you should try the Air Force," Mitchell suggested one afternoon after Sarah had difficulty with the obstacle course. "I hear they have nice comfortable desks where you can do your nails." The other Marines around him chuckled, but Sarah simply wiped the mud from her hands and asked if she could try the course again. Her persistence was starting to annoy them more than her initial weakness had. What really bothered the Marines wasn't just that Sarah seemed out of place, it was that she never fought back or complained. She took every insult, every unfair task, every bit of extra duty with the same quiet determination. When they expected her to break down or demand to speak to someone in charge, she just kept doing whatever was asked of her. During evening chow one night, the conversation at Mitchell's table turned to speculation about Sarah's background. "I bet she's some politician's daughter," suggested Ritchie. "You know how they sometimes stick their kids in the military for a few months to make themselves look good. Or maybe she's some kind of social experiment," added Private Davis. "Like they want to see how real Marines handle having civilians around." The theories grew more elaborate each day, but none of them came close to the truth. Sarah continued her routine, struggling through PT, eating alone, and spending her free time reading or writing in a small notebook she kept in her footlocker. One evening, Santos noticed Sarah studying what looked like technical manuals instead of the basic training materials the rest of them were supposed to be reading. "What's all that?" she asked. Sarah quickly closed the book. "Just some reading material," she said. "Helps me sleep." But Santos had caught a glimpse of the cover advanced tactical operations, way beyond anything a new recruit should be studying. She decided not to push the issue, but it added another piece to the puzzle that was Sarah Chen. The harassment continued into the second week. During a live fire exercise, Mitchell made sure Sarah was assigned the oldest, least reliable rifle on the range. When it jammed repeatedly, he made a show of checking it and declaring it operator error. The range instructor, Staff Sergeant Parker, wasn't buying it. "Mitchell, switch weapons with Chen and let's see how that rifle performs for you," Parker ordered. When Mitchell's shots were scattered all over the target with the same rifle Sarah had been using, Parker made him clean every weapon on the range after the exercise was over. But this small victory for Sarah only made Mitchell more determined to prove she didn't belong. The breaking point came during a field exercise in the third week. The Marines were participating in a simulated combat scenario in the hills outside the base. Sarah's squad was tasked with securing a hilltop position while another unit played the role of enemy forces trying to take it from them. As they moved through the brush in the pre-dawn darkness, Mitchell decided to have some fun. He quietly changed the route markers, leading Sarah's fire team away from the rest of the squad and toward what he thought was an empty section of the training area. "Follow the markers, Chen," he whispered, "and try not to get us all killed with your civilian skills." But Mitchell had made a serious mistake. The area he'd directed them toward was being used by a special operations unit for their own training exercise, one that involved live ammunition and real explosives. As Sarah's team crept through the darkness, they unknowingly walked into an active combat simulation involving some of the most elite Marines on the base. The first indication that something was wrong came when they heard the distinct crack of high-powered rifles much closer than they should have been. Real bullets began snapping through the trees around them, and the ground shook from explosions that were definitely not part of their training scenario. "Get down!" Sarah hissed, dropping to the ground as a burst of machine gun fire raked the trees above their heads. The three Marines with her, Mitchell, Richie, and a young private named Johnson, hit the dirt hard, suddenly realizing they were in serious danger. Mitchell's face went white as he understood what had happened. "Oh no," he whispered. "We're in the wrong sector. This is live fire." Richie started to panic. "We need to get out of here. We need to call for help." But before anyone could reach for their radio, Sarah was already moving. The quiet, seemingly helpless recruit, who had been struggling with basic training, suddenly transformed into someone entirely different. She moved through the terrain like she'd been born in it, using hand signals that were far more advanced than anything they'd been taught in basic training. "Johnson, 30 meters north, overwatch position," she whispered, her voice carrying an authority that made the young Marine obey without question. "Ricky, take the radio and establish comms with base. Tell them we have personnel in the live fire zone. Mitchell, you're with me." Mitchell stared at her in shock. This wasn't the same person who'd been finishing last in PT and struggling with her rifle. Sarah moved with the fluid precision of a seasoned combat veteran, reading the terrain and the tactical situation like she'd been doing it for years. As they low-crawled toward safety, avoiding the ongoing special ops exercise, Mitchell couldn't help but wonder who Sarah Chen really was. The way she moved, the commands she gave, the calm professionalism under fire, none of it matched the struggling recruit they'd all been tormenting for the past 3 weeks. When they finally reached the safe zone and the confusion was sorted out, Sarah immediately returned to her quiet, unassuming demeanor. She handed the radio back to Richie and fell into formation with the rest of the squad as if nothing had happened. But Mitchell had seen enough to know that there was much more to the new girl than any of them had realized. That night in the barracks, he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. The Sarah Chen who had led them out of danger was not the same person who struggled to complete a 5-mile run. Someone was playing a game, and Mitchell was starting to suspect they were all pawns in it. As he lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, one question kept running through his mind. Just who the hell was Sarah Chen? And what was she really doing at Camp Pendleton? The incident in the live fire zone had planted a seed of doubt in Mitchell's mind, but he wasn't ready to give up his campaign against Sarah just yet. If anything, he doubled down on his efforts to expose what he saw as her weakness and unsuitability for marine life. However, his methods became more calculated and his observations more careful. During the following week's combat training, Mitchell watched Sarah like a hawk. She continued to struggle with the basic exercises, fumbling with her rifle assembly, finishing last in sprints, and appearing confused by simple tactical concepts. But now Mitchell was looking for cracks in the facade, and he was beginning to find them. When Sarah thought no one was watching, her movements were different. He caught glimpses of perfect weapons handling when she cleaned her rifle alone in the armory. During downtime, he noticed she would unconsciously fall into a relaxed but alert posture that suggested years of military training. Most telling of all, when loud noises occurred unexpectedly, a truck backfiring, a door slamming, Sarah's reactions were those of someone with combat experience, not a civilian recruit. Mitchell decided to test his theory. During a night navigation exercise, he deliberately gave Sarah incorrect compass readings, hoping to get her lost in the hills around the base. But instead of following his directions, Sarah seemed to instinctively know the correct route. When he questioned her about it, she claimed she'd gotten lucky guessing. Lucky? Mitchell pressed. You navigated through 3 miles of rough terrain in the dark with a broken compass and you call it luck? Sarah shrugged. I used to go camping with my dad when I was little. Must have picked up a few things. But Mitchell wasn't buying it anymore. No amount of childhood camping explained the level of skill he'd witnessed. He started asking around, trying to learn more about Sarah's background. The official story was simple. She was a college dropout from California who had enlisted to find direction in her life. But the more Mitchell dug, the more questions he had. For starters, Sarah's paperwork had arrived through unusual channels. Instead of coming from a regular recruiting station, her orders had been hand-delivered by a colonel from Quantico that no one on base had ever seen before. The processing had been rushed through in a matter of days, skipping several standard procedures. Santos had noticed other oddities about their mysterious bunkmate. Sarah received mail regularly, but it never came through normal postal channels. Instead, it was delivered directly to the base commander's office and then passed down to her. The return addresses were always different, and Sarah would immediately destroy the letters after reading them. She gets more personal mail than anyone else in the company, Santos confided to Mitchell one evening. But I've never seen her write a letter back to anyone. And have you noticed she never talks about home? Most people can't shut up about their family and friends, but Sarah never mentions anyone from her past. Mitchell had noticed. In 3 weeks, Sarah had never once mentioned parents, siblings, friends, or even the college she supposedly attended. When other Marines shared stories about their hometowns or high school experiences, Sarah would listen politely, but never contribute anything personal. The breakthrough came during a surprise inspection by visiting officers from Headquarters Marine Corps. The inspection team included several high-ranking officials who were evaluating the training programs at Camp Pendleton. Sarah happened to be cleaning equipment in the armory when the inspection party walked through. Mitchell was positioned where he could observe the interaction, and what he saw confirmed his suspicions. When the lead inspector, a full colonel with multiple rows of ribbons, spotted Sarah, his face showed clear recognition. The colonel approached her and spoke in low tones for several minutes while Sarah maintained a respectful but clearly familiar demeanor. The conversation was too quiet for Mitchell to overhear, but he could see Sarah responding to questions with confidence and detail that suggested extensive knowledge of subjects well beyond basic training. At one point, the colonel nodded approvingly and made a note in a small notebook before moving on with his inspection. After the officers left, Mitchell confronted Sarah directly. "Who was that colonel, and how do you know him?" Sarah's response was carefully neutral. "I don't know what you mean. He was just asking about the equipment maintenance procedures." "For 20 minutes? And why did he look like he knew you? I think you're imagining things, Mitchell." "Maybe you should focus more on your own training and less on mine." But Mitchell was past the point of being deterred by Sarah's deflections. He decided to take his concerns to someone with more authority and resources to investigate. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had always been fair and observant, and Mitchell thought he might have noticed the same inconsistencies. When Mitchell approached Rodriguez privately, he was surprised to learn that the staff sergeant had indeed been keeping an eye on Sarah, but for different reasons than Mitchell expected. "I've been wondering about her myself," Rodriguez admitted. "Her training records show she's struggling, but I've seen her demonstrate skills that don't match her supposed experience level. Last week I watched her field strip and reassemble an M240 machine gun in under 2 minutes blindfolded. That's not something you learn in basic training." Rodriguez revealed that he'd been conducting his own quiet investigation into Sarah's background. The more he looked, the stranger things became. Her social security number was legitimate, but her employment history before enlisting was practically non-existent. The college she claimed to have attended had no record of her enrollment, though their database showed she had somehow accessed their library systems remotely multiple times. "Most interesting of all," Rodriguez continued, "is her medical file. According to her physical, she's in outstanding health with no previous injuries, but I've noticed small scars on her hands and arms that suggest combat training with edged weapons. The doctor who did her physical was a civilian contractor, not one of our regular medical staff. The two men decided to expand their investigation, but they agreed to be discreet. If Sarah was indeed not what she seemed, they needed to be careful not to compromise whatever operation might be in progress. Their opportunity for closer observation came during a multi-unit training exercise designed to test inter-service cooperation. Marines from Camp Pendleton would be working alongside Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and Air Force Special Operations personnel in a series of complex scenarios. Sarah's company was assigned to provide support services, communications, logistics, and perimeter security. It was supposed to be a relatively simple assignment that would give the junior Marines exposure to special operations without putting them in demanding tactical situations. During the first day of the exercise, Sarah was assigned to the communications tent, helping to relay messages between different units. Mitchell and Rodriguez positioned themselves where they could observe her interactions with the special operations personnel. What they witnessed was remarkable. The SEALs and Rangers, who typically treated regular Marines with polite but distant professionalism, seemed to defer to Sarah in ways that made no sense given her apparent rank and experience. A Navy SEAL lieutenant actually sought out her opinion on radio protocols, and an Army Ranger captain spent several minutes discussing tactical frequencies with her as if she were a peer. Most telling was an incident that occurred when technical problems arose with the primary communication system. The senior communications officer, a Marine captain with 15 years of experience, was struggling to diagnose the issue when Sarah quietly stepped forward. "Sir, if I may," she said respectfully, "I think the problem might be in the encryption module. The frequency synchronization appears to be offset by about 12 megahertz. The captain looked at her skeptically. "Private, this is advanced equipment. I don't think you have the technical background to—" "With respect, sir," Sarah interrupted gently, "I've worked with this system before. If you check the third circuit board from the left, you'll probably find a loose connection on the blue wire cluster." The captain clearly wanted to dismiss her suggestion, but with communications down and the exercise schedule at risk, he decided to check. After 20 minutes of testing, he found exactly what Sarah had predicted: a loose connection that was causing the frequency drift.
"How did you know that?"
he demanded, staring at Sarah with new respect and considerable confusion. "Lucky guess, sir," Sarah replied. "Sometimes the obvious answer is the right one, but Mitchell and Rodriguez knew it wasn't luck. Sarah had diagnosed a complex technical problem that had stumped an experienced officer, and she'd done it in seconds. That level of expertise didn't come from lucky guesses or casual familiarity with the equipment." The pattern continued throughout the exercise. Whenever challenging situations arose, Sarah would somehow find herself in position to provide solutions that revealed knowledge far beyond what her official record suggested. She helped coordinate helicopter landing zones with the precision of an air traffic controller. She spotted potential security vulnerabilities and perimeter defenses that experienced Rangers had missed. And during a simulated casualty evacuation, she provided medical assistance that impressed even the special operations medics. By the end of the 3-day exercise, Rodriguez and Mitchell had compiled a list of observations that painted a clear picture. Sarah Chen was not a struggling recruit learning the basics of military life. She was someone with extensive training and experience who was deliberately maintaining a cover identity. The question that remained was why. What kind of operation required placing someone with obvious special operations level skills in a basic training environment while pretending to be an inexperienced civilian recruit? Rodriguez decided it was time to take the matter up the chain of command, but when he attempted to schedule a meeting with the company commander to discuss his concerns, he was told that Major Thompson was not available and that all inquiries regarding personnel matters should be directed through proper administrative channels. When Rodriguez pressed for more information, he was informed that any questions about specific personnel assignments were classified above his clearance level. The message was clear. Sarah Chen's presence at Camp Pendleton was part of something bigger than a routine training assignment, and junior non-commissioned officers were not supposed to be asking questions about it. But Mitchell wasn't ready to let the matter drop. If Sarah was some kind of undercover operative, he wanted to know why she'd been placed in his unit and what she was really doing there. More importantly, he was beginning to suspect that the harassment campaign he'd been leading wasn't just cruel. It might actually be interfering with a legitimate military operation. The realization that he might have been unknowingly working against his own service's interests made Mitchell reconsider everything that had happened over the past month. If Sarah was enduring their treatment as part of her mission, what did that say about the level of professionalism and dedication she was demonstrating? For the first time since Sarah's arrival, Mitchell found himself feeling something other than resentment toward the mysterious recruit. He was beginning to feel respect and perhaps a little guilt about how he'd treated someone who might very well outrank him in ways he couldn't understand. As the exercise concluded and the units returned to their regular training schedules, Mitchell made a decision. He was going to find out who Sarah Chen really was, even if it meant going outside official channels to do it. The truth was out there, and he was determined to uncover it. Mitchell's opportunity for answers came sooner than expected, though not in the way he had planned. A week after the joint training exercise, Camp Pendleton received an emergency alert that would change everything and finally reveal the truth about Sarah Chen. At 030 hours, alarms began wailing across the base. The emergency notification system crackled to life, announcing that a group of armed terrorists had been spotted attempting to infiltrate the base perimeter near the ammunition depot. This was not a drill. Real hostiles with unknown capabilities and intentions had penetrated one of the most secure military installations in the country. All personnel were ordered to immediately report to their designated emergency stations. Sarah's company was assigned to secure the barracks area and ensure the safety of non-essential personnel, while specialized security forces dealt with the threat. It was exactly the kind of assignment that kept junior Marines out of harm's way, while the professionals handled the dangerous work. But as the company assembled in the pre-dawn darkness, something unexpected happened. A black SUV with government plates screeched to a halt outside the barracks, and two men in civilian clothes stepped out. They walked directly to where Sarah stood in formation and spoke quietly with the company commander, Major Thompson. Mitchell watched in amazement as Thompson nodded repeatedly, then stepped back and called out, "Private Chen, front and center!" Sarah moved to the front of the formation with the same quiet composure she'd shown throughout her time on base. But when one of the civilians spoke to her, everything changed. Her posture shifted from that of a junior enlisted Marine to something entirely different, confident, authoritative, and unmistakably in command. "Ma'am," the civilian said, "we have a code black situation. The infiltration team has advanced training and equipment that suggests state-level sponsorship. Initial contact indicates they're after the classified materials in Building 447. We need you to take operational control immediately." Sarah nodded once, then turned to face her shocked company. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made every Marine in the formation stand straighter. "Listen carefully," she said. "What you're about to witness is classified at the highest levels. The operation you've been observing for the past month has been preparing for exactly this type of scenario. I'm going to need absolute cooperation and complete silence about what happens next." Major Thompson stepped forward, his face showing a mixture of respect and nervousness. "Marines, I want you to understand that Private Chen is not actually a private. You are about to receive orders from Colonel Sarah Chen, United States Marine Corps, Special Activities Division. Colonel Chen has been operating under deep cover as part of a counterintelligence operation, and her true identity is now being revealed due to operational necessity." The formation erupted in whispers and shocked gasps. Mitchell felt his jaw drop as he stared at the woman he'd been tormenting for a month. Colonel Chen, not Private Chen, was a full bird colonel with 20 years of service, most of it in the most classified and dangerous operations the Marine Corps conducted. Sarah Colonel Chen quickly moved into action. "Major Thompson, I need you to establish a command post in the main administrative building. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, you're now my operations NCO. Corporal Mitchell, front and center." Mitchell jogged forward, his mind reeling. The woman he'd been hazing was not only a superior officer, she was so far above him in rank and experience that he could barely comprehend it. "Mitchell," Colonel Chen said, her tone professional but not unkind, "you've spent the past month testing me in ways you didn't understand. Now I'm going to test you. I need someone who knows this base intimately and isn't afraid to take initiative. Are you ready to prove you're the Marine I think you can be?" Mitchell stammered his response. "Yes, ma'am." "Colonel, I need to apologize for—" "No time for that now?" She cut him off. "We have hostiles on the base and Marines in danger. You can apologize later by doing your job perfectly. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." What followed was a masterclass in military leadership and tactical operations. Colonel Chen transformed from the struggling recruit they'd all known into a seasoned combat leader who orchestrated the base's response with precision and skill that left everyone around her amazed. She dispatched teams to secure key facilities, coordinated with arriving federal law enforcement agencies, and maintained constant communication with the specialized units hunting the infiltrators. Her knowledge of the base layout, gained during her month of basic training, proved invaluable as she guided forces through the most efficient routes to intercept the hostiles. Mitchell found himself assigned as her personal runner, carrying messages and coordinating between different units. As he watched her work, he began to understand the true scope of what had been happening. Colonel Chen hadn't just been pretending to be a recruit. She'd been conducting a comprehensive security assessment of Camp Pendleton, while simultaneously testing the base's personnel for potential security risks. The infiltration tonight wasn't random, she explained to the command team during a brief tactical pause. Intelligence suggested that hostile actors had detailed knowledge of our security procedures. Someone with access to classified information was feeding them data. This operation was designed to identify the source of the leak while preparing defenses for exactly this type of attack. As dawn broke, the situation reached its climax. The infiltrators had been cornered in a maintenance facility near the base's communications center, but they had taken 2 Marine guards as hostages. The standoff required delicate handling to avoid casualties while preventing the terrorists from accessing or destroying critical equipment. Colonel Chen made the decision to personally lead the negotiation effort. As she prepared to approach the building where the hostiles were barricaded, Mitchell realized he was about to witness the true measure of the officer he'd spent a month underestimating.
Mitchell,
she said as she checked her equipment,
I want you to understand something.
the way you and your friends treated me over the past month was exactly what I needed to see. Military units are only as strong as their weakest members, and how Marines treat those they perceive as weak reveals everything about their character and training. Mitchell felt a wave of shame. Ma'am, we failed that test completely. Some of you did, she agreed, but not all. Santos showed kindness and loyalty. Rodriguez demonstrated leadership by questioning inconsistencies rather than just accepting them. And you, Mitchell, showed the intelligence and persistence to investigate when things didn't add up. Those are the qualities we need in Marines who might someday face real threats like this. The negotiation lasted 2 hours. Colonel Chen's combination of tactical expertise and psychological insight gradually convinced the hostiles that their situation was hopeless. When they finally surrendered, it was revealed that the infiltration had indeed been supported by inside information. A civilian contractor with access to base security protocols had been selling intelligence to foreign agents. As the crisis ended and normal operations resumed, Colonel Chen gathered the Marines who had interacted with her during her undercover assignment. Standing before them in her actual rank insignia, she looked like a completely different person from the struggling recruit they'd known. Over the past month, you've all been participating in an operation you didn't know existed, she began. Your reactions, your behavior, and your performance have been evaluated as part of a comprehensive security review. Some of you exceeded expectations, some met them, and some fell short. She looked directly at Mitchell. Corporal Mitchell, you've shown both the best and worst of Marine Corps values. Your initial treatment of someone you perceived as weak was unacceptable and reflected poorly on your leadership potential. However, your determination to uncover the truth when you sensed something was wrong demonstrated exactly the kind of critical thinking we need in our NCOs. Mitchell stood at attention, unsure whether he was about to be commended or court-martialed. You're being transferred to a new assignment, Colonel Chen continued. The Special Activities Division needs Marines who can think independently and aren't afraid to challenge assumptions. Your new orders will be cut within the week. The revelation sent shockwaves through the entire company. Not only had they been living and working alongside a colonel for a month without knowing it, but their behavior during that time had been a test that would affect their future careers. Santos was also selected for advanced training, her consistent kindness and loyalty marking her as someone who could be trusted in sensitive situations. Rodriguez was recommended for promotion and assignment to a classified unit that couldn't be discussed. As for the Marines who had participated in the harassment campaign without ever questioning whether it was appropriate, they found themselves facing additional training on military values and proper treatment of fellow service members. In the days that followed, the full scope of Colonel Chen's background became clear to those with appropriate clearances. She was a legendary figure in special operations circles, with decorations for valor in classified operations around the world. Her assignment to Camp Pendleton had been part of a long-term investigation into security vulnerabilities at major military installations. The months she'd spent as Private Chen had provided invaluable intelligence about how information flowed through the base, which personnel could be trusted with sensitive materials, and how the Marines responded to stress and unusual situations. The terrorist infiltration had been the culmination of months of planning, and her presence on base had been the key factor in preventing what could have been a catastrophic security breach. For Mitchell, the experience became a turning point in his military career. Working directly with Colonel Chen during the crisis had shown him what true military excellence looked like. Her combination of tactical skill, leadership ability, and personal integrity set a standard he would spend the rest of his career trying to meet. Years later, as he advanced through the ranks himself, Mitchell would tell the story of the month he spent harassing a colonel without knowing it. It became a powerful lesson about the importance of treating every Marine with respect, regardless of their apparent rank or experience level. You never knew who might be watching, evaluating, and learning from your actions. But more than that, it was a lesson about the dedication and professionalism of the Marines who served in the shadows, protecting national security through missions that could never be fully acknowledged or understood. Colonel Sarah Chen had endured weeks of harassment and disrespect without breaking character or compromising her mission, demonstrating a level of commitment that inspired everyone who learned her true story. The new girl on base, who had seemed like such an easy target, had turned out to be one of the most formidable Marines any of them would ever encounter. Her true rank had indeed shocked everyone, but the real surprise was learning what it meant to serve alongside someone who embodied the highest ideals of the Corps while making the ultimate sacrifice of allowing others to believe she was weak in order to protect them all.